Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, thank you very much for taking a little bit of time to talk to NBC News. President Biden has described the decision to cut oil production by OPEC Plus as misguided. You're in the room when the decision is made. How is a decision like that reached?
Firstly, I would like to say that our joint activities, the coordination of actions of 23 countries, all part of the OPEC Plus agreement, has been working for 6 years already. And it has shown its effectiveness, linked us to making the correct, efficient decisions, directed first and foremost toward the balancing of supply and demand on the oil market and ensuring the normal functioning of the industry, so that investments and supplies of energy resources are provided in the required volume, both at the current moment and in the future. When making decisions and discussing, we never proceed from the idea of achieving some target level of oil prices. First and foremost, it is important for us to accurately forecast the balance of supply and demand. And during our last meeting, we discussed this question very carefully. When we were making the decision to reduce oil production by 2 million barrels per day, we based our decision on multiple factors. Firstly, this was the decrease in demand in the fourth quarter, the traditionally seasonal decrease in demand. Next, we see that the economic growth is slowing down, both in the global economy and in certain developed countries. And this is supported by the fact that the central banks have decided to raise interest rates, which is also negative, and we believe that there are all signs of a recession. Moreover, there are many uncertainties with regards to oil supply to the global market as a whole as a result of the lack of spare capacity and underfunding of investments. The agreement has been extended till the end of 2023. If necessary, we can always meet again, and if the current situation on the market changes, we are ready to make corrections. This has always been our position, together with the other countries.
President Biden thinks there's an alliance between you and Saudi Arabia. He says there's going to be consequences for Saudi Arabia for what they've done with Russia.
Indeed, we are large producers. Both Saudi Arabia and Russia are the largest producers and exporters of oil in the world. At the same time, I would like to highlight and clearly state that all of the decisions that are considered and made within the framework of our cooperation with these 23 countries are made in a consolidated way. That is, to make a decision, all 23 countries have to vote for this decision. That's why a discussion takes place, a development of arguments, and an evaluation of the situation. And eventually, we make a consensus decision with all 23 countries.
But of course, Russia and Saudi Arabia are very powerful voices in OPEC Plus. Did you lobby? Did you put pressure on for this cut in oil production? Did you have Saudi Arabia on your side?
You know, there's never any pressure because all the countries are sovereign and independent and they have the right to think and make decisions. A discussion takes place and a mutual consolidated opinion is put forward. I would also like to add that I don't understand why there's such a wide discussion surrounding our decision, as though it's wrong, that we should have done things differently. Once again, I repeat that we are basing our decision on the rational estimate of supply and demand balance. At the same time, I would like to say that individual decisions that are made in a one-sided fashion by Western countries, including in both the oil and gas sectors, are damaging our industry and the global energy security overall. In particular, the decision by the US, Canada, Great Britain, and the European Union to ban the import of Russian oil and oil products only causes chaos and confusion in the energy balance that took years to form from the point of view of market development and supply and demand. If we see problems on the market and uncertainties existing today, they are created manually and not by us. Rather, they are created by those who interfere with market instruments by introduction of illegal, one-sided sanctions, bans on the supply of equipment, and on the investments in these industries, on the creation of the necessary infrastructure. On the contrary, we are balancing to offset negative consequences for the market that, again, have been created by individual countries that are interfering with the market structures.
President Putin described the apparent sabotage of the Nord Stream 2 pipelines as international terrorism. What does he mean, and who do you blame?
Well, he means what he says.
International terrorism. Is there a specific country that you blame?
I think that everyone understands what is being implied, who is interested in these pipelines not working, and for Nord Stream 2 not to be built. It's clear that certain investigative actions will be done and a final report will be produced on this act of sabotage. But I would like to draw your attention to the fact that Russian specialists are not being allowed to participate in the investigation, despite our official requests, and despite the fact that Russia, specifically Gazprom, is the main proprietor of this infrastructure. It is a very strange situation when we are being barred from the investigation. It raises big questions and doubts about the objective and adequate nature of the upcoming investigations.
You work closely with President Putin. How would you describe his frame of mind right now?
Well, the president, first and foremost, thinks about our country's interests and the interests of people who live in our country.
He spoke for 30 minutes today. He didn't take questions. That's unusual for him.
Well, today's format is the way that it is in the current circumstances, and I think it's also a good format for when ministers and CEOs of large companies take part in a panel session.
Let me put it to you this way. President Biden describes President Putin as a rational actor who's made a miscalculation.
I don't know what President Biden is talking about, but we see that our president makes decisions that are necessary for development and security of our country. And the support for his decisions from the people who live in our country is very high.
You were sanctioned by the US last month. What impact has that had on you? And the IMF just said that oil sales, Russian oil sales, are supporting the Russian economy. Are oil sales saving Russia?
As for the sanctions, it doesn't affect me at all. As all the limitations that have been imposed in relation to my actions, they don't really apply. So it doesn't affect me, even indirectly. With regards to the IMF statements on the sale of oil resources, I would firstly advise the IMF to draw their attention not to the fact that we are making money by selling products, but to the fact that we are, first of all, the largest exporter of energy resources on the global market. In terms of oil, we account for more than 20%. And with regards to gas, it's also over 20%. That's why the IMF should first and foremost focus on the fact that Russia has enormous supplies of gas, oil, and is a major exporter and guarantor of energy security and the development of both the global economy and individual markets. And artificial limitations of such large exporters will only lead to a deficit and increase in price of these resources. That's why it's important to think about this first.
You're talking about the potential price cap.
Both the price cap and the caps on exports that have already been agreed on.
Yeah. The IMF says that Russian oil is being rerouted to India and China at a discount. Are India and China helping support the Russian economy?
This means, first of all, that Russian oil trades at a discount on market terms, given the risks that are there, the factors that everyone is aware of, risks related to financing, securing freight, payments for deliveries, and so on. The discount is market-based. Further to that, in my opinion, India and China are primarily interested in meeting the needs of their own economies in terms of energy resources. Therefore, it is clear that if Russian oil is cheaper on the market today, then it will find a consumer who is interested in buying it. So we're not talking about any special support for Russia, but rather ordinary market instruments for redirecting goods from one market to another in accordance with the market conditions.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.